Hello everyone, my name is Oktay and welcome to Teaching Phonics to Kids, Week 2. In the previous weeks, we have covered the first half of this specific week. We covered the first half of Week 2 before our midterms. So after our midterms, we are going to be covering the other half of this week we have here. So let's start now. Let's look at the outline. Well, what we're going to be, focus on today is that we're going to be focusing on practicing what we have learned so far. We are going to be practicing phonemes and graphemes. In general, also we're going to be talking about how we can, apply these practices to the kids that you're trying to teach. So before practicing, I'm going to give you some tips in order to how to, apply these practices to your teaching. And after those tips, we're going to look at, as I've said before, practicing phonemes and graphemes. And at the very end, we're going to look at how we can utilize alphabet books. So let's start with before practice tips. Well, as we have mentioned before, kids tend to find, shorter and larger units of sounds to be easier to dissect and destruct or just segment. So you should keep in mind that words with two phonemes, and as again, just to remind you, phonemes are the smallest units of sounds in the English language. So words with two phonemes for children are easier to segment than words with three or more phonemes. So, for example, the word tie is easier to segment, dissect, or destructure than segmenting the word cat, because tie has two phonemes and cat has three phonemes. For example, tie has t and I in as in a diphthong, and cat has three phonemes, k, a, and t, like t. So, a kid might have an easier time dissecting the word tie other than, cat. So keep in mind that you should keep it short and keep it larger. Another tip we can give here is that, kids tend to, pay more attention to the initial sound and the ending sounds of the words that you're trying to dissect or segment. Kids, for example, we have crab. Whenever you say crab and when you want the kids that you teach to dissect this word into their phonemes, they might have an easier time to dissect the first and last sounds. So they can easily say k and b are phonemes in this word crab here, but they might have a harder time to, find out and a are also in this word and they're also phonemes. They can understand it, yes, but they might have a harder time understanding this. And another tip we can give here is that you should use more continuant consonants, rather than stop consonants like p, b, t, d, k, j, and ch, because stop consonants are more and more harder to pronounce for kids, because whenever you're trying to pronounce stop consonants, you always have to add the sound, as I mentioned, p, b, t, d, k. There's always this sound. But whereas continued consonants are easier to pronounce because you do not always have to add the sound to these letters here. So, words that start with continued consonants can be easier for, prior to school children to, segment and dissect other than stop consonants. Words that start with stop consonants. And another tip that we can give here is that if you want to, if you want the kids that you're trying to teach to, if you want them to connect, have a connection between phonemes and graphemes, you can start this by doing, if they know their name, if they don't know how to spell their name, you can, develop from there, because you can start with their name and you can use the letters in their name, and you can create some new words with them. and you can add more and more new letters to that new word that you created with their name, with the letters that are in their name. So you can create new words and new sounds, and you can make new connections by starting with their names. So by doing this, kids can, apply their own knowledge of the English language, or knowledge of the phonics and all that. So you can start developing here. And another great technique that you can use, sorting activities. They are very great for you to, make a connection between letters and sounds. So as you can see from the image on the left here, there are cups named A, B, C, and there are sticks, and at the very end they have little flower petals that have A, B, and C in them. So kids can try to sort these out. This is a bit more explicit way of teaching, but it's still a very great way of teaching. So these were the tips. So let's start with practicing phonemes right now. You can use these activities to teach your kids how to identify these sounds, or how to make connections with these graphemes and phonemes. So you can use these. So let's look at the sound. Right now, what I want you to do is that I want you to identify the sounds in here. So we have, at the very first, we have U as in push. So look at these words. Which one of these words sound the same as in push? We have although, sugar, beauty, and pump. And as you have guessed it, the answer is sugar. And then we have A as in way. Is it pie? Is it height? Is it rate? Or is it friend? Pie, height, rate, or friend? Way, ray, way, height. So the correct answer, if I'm not mistaken, is rate. But these can change depending on your accent, and depending on where you're coming from the world. So the answers of these questions can depend on you. And at the very end, we have Z as in does. Is it miss, knows, votes, or runs? Well, it's obviously knows, as in Z, knows. You can hear the Z in knows. And as I've said before, these can change depending on your accent and depending on where you're coming from. Now we have phoneme counting. Now I want you to look at these words, and I want you to make a guess, how many phonemes or how many sounds do these words have? For example, thrill. How many phonemes does thrill have? Let's look at it.
Thrill has 4 phonemes. I, O, thrill.
As you can see, 3 phonemes. How many phonemes does have?
Does has 3 phonemes. D, A, Z, does.
And let's look at quack.
Quack has 4 phonemes. K, W, A, K, quack.
And let's look at the ring.
Ring has 3 phonemes. I, ring.
Let's look at fix.
Fix has 3 phonemes. X, fix.
And lastly, let's look at sword.
Sword has 3 phonemes. S, or, D, sword.
As you can see from here, the speaker in this, in this audio was an Australian person. So, it can depend on their accent. Depending on your accent, there could be more phonemes or there could be less phonemes. So, the answers can change depending on you again.
Thrill has 4 phonemes.
Sorry. Oh, there were so many voices there. So, let's look at the other practice we have here, which is practicing graphemes. As we mentioned before practice tips, then we can use sorting activities to to help kids gain a connection, have a connection between words and shapes or words and objects and all that. So this is a great way of, applying that kind of tip to an actual practice here. So what I want you to do here is that I want you to match the images with the initial sounds of these images. So the initial sounds we have S, M, A, T, R, and B sounds. So let's look at what this image is. It's an apple, so it goes under the category of A here. And then we have a mango, so it goes under M. And we have a mouse, so it also goes under M. And when we have scissors and socks, these both go under S. And then we have an ant, which goes under A. And we have a train and a truck, and they go under TR. And we have a banana and a bowl, and they also go under B, as you can see right here. But these kind of practices are very easy for us. But for kids, these are very nice ways of making connection between symbols, between objects, between items and sounds. So you can apply these kind of practices in your teachings. And then we have alphabet books. Alphabet books are very great for us to, expose children to sounds, sounds of this English language through like visual aids and auditory aids between, letters and verbs. They might not always have a sort of auditory aid in these alphabet books. They sometimes have, but it's usually visually corresponded, as you can see here. Is it pronounced tree or tree? Is it the focus to be? Is the focus on the tree or bird or the swing? Alphabet books for some children, sorry, can be very complex. So children might, in order to make in order to use a correct alphabet book or a more simpler or more appropriate alphabet book, the alphabet book should be, visually correct. It should be, it should point you to the direction of what they're trying to teach you. They all have their names. They should all have their names, and it can be understandable. So children need to be able to, as we have said, they need to be able to understand visual information given in the alphabet book. They should be able to determine what part of the image requires attention, and they should be able to name each part of the image, and they should be able to understand what the image represents. But not all the alphabet books are that great. So you should handpick the alphabet book you are going to use for your teachings. And yeah, this was all for this week. It was kind of short, relatively short. But this was the half of what we have done in the previous week. So yeah, this was all about it. So see you later until the next week.